All right, welcome to the deep dive. This week we've got a really interesting collection of news from the world of crypto. We're looking at BN Crypto's report from March 21st, 2025. And, instead of everyone having to scroll through tons of headlines, we're bringing you the most important stuff so you can dive right in.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening out there right now. And this week's news really shows us that the crypto world is changing in a lot of different ways, from people starting new projects from the ground up to big legal battles to the whole world of digital money changing fast.
So what are we focusing on today? Well, we're going deep into the latest with Pi Network. They just had their KYC deadline, and there's some talk about bots being involved, which is a little weird. And then, get this, the SEC is actually dropping its lawsuit against Ripple. We'll break that down for sure. And then we'll talk about something a bit concerning. It seems like people on the darknet are using DeFi more and more to launder money. Plus, we've got former President Trump talking about stablecoins, and there's even a vote happening on Binance about adding some pretty, let's say, interesting meme coins. So yeah, we're covering a lot today. We'll try to make sense of it all for you, explain what really matters, and maybe even share some things you might not know.
Right. And, we always try to go beyond just the headlines. We want to understand what's really happening underneath and what these developments mean for the future. What's the big picture here?
Okay, so let's start with Pi Network. For anyone who's not familiar, Pi Network is this project that's gotten super popular. Basically, people can mine their PI token using just an app on their phone.
Yeah, they've built up a really large community, which makes all of this even more interesting.
Exactly. So their deadline for users to complete KYC, which is Know Your Customer Verification, that just passed.
Right.
And if you missed it, well, it seems like a lot of those PI tokens are just gone now, lost or frozen. So you can imagine how frustrated some people are. The report mentions that for some, the verification process was just too hard, or maybe it wasn't even offered in their country. I mean, that's tough if you've been mining for a while.
It really shows you that even with these decentralized projects, there's still challenges. It's like they want everyone to be able to participate, but they also have to have these security measures.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this tension between making things easy to use and making sure everything is secure. And this situation with Pi Network really shows that it's not easy to bring in millions of users while also following all the different rules and regulations around the world.
Right, because every country has different rules about this stuff.
And it makes you think, like, how can these decentralized projects really achieve that goal of being open to everyone when they have to deal with all these different laws and technical issues?
Yeah, it's a big question.
Oh, and there's more to the story. There's this whole thing about strange activity on CoinMarketCap. Apparently, Pi Network had a community sentiment poll, and the positive sentiment dropped like 90% in one day.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of users think there might have been some bot manipulation going on. One user, a pioneer as they call themselves, even pointed out that the total number of votes was higher than Bitcoin's, which, is a bit suspicious.
Yeah, that definitely raises some red flags.
I mean, with Bitcoin, you'd expect a lot of activity, right? But for Pi Network to have even more votes.
It's like, how is that even possible?
Exactly. Now, to be fair, the report says there's no solid proof of bots. But they also mentioned that the Pi community has a history of this thing called vote brigading.
Oh, right.
Yeah, where they basically try to influence polls by getting a ton of people to vote in a certain way.
So even though there's no proof, it's easy to see why people might be suspicious.
Right, because of that history. It really highlights how important trust is in these online communities, especially when you're dealing with things like money and investments.
Yeah, because if you can't trust the numbers, then what can you trust?
Exactly.
And, it makes it really hard for a project to accurately gauge how the community feels.
Oh, and just to mention another Pi Network update, they've also started rolling out these .pi domains.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're supposed to be like unique digital identities for Pi users.
Yeah.
And right now they're having a bidding process where people can use their Pi cryptocurrency to try and get the domain name they want. The bidding's going on from now, actually mid-March, until the end of June.
So it's like they're trying to make the PI token more useful, give it more value, beyond just mining it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, whether those .pi domains become a big thing.
Yeah, it all depends on how successful Pi Network becomes in the long run.
Okay, let's switch gears now to something that could have a much bigger impact. The SEC has decided to drop its lawsuit against Ripple. I mean, this is huge news in the crypto world, isn't it?
Absolutely. This case has been going on since 2020, and it's really been a big question mark hanging over Ripple and XRP. And honestly, it's affected how people view the whole cryptocurrency market in the US.
Right, because the SEC was basically saying that when Ripple sold XRP, it was like selling an unregistered security, which is a big no-no in their eyes.
Exactly.
And this case has gone back and forth, with Ripple winning some smaller legal battles along the way. But the fact that the SEC is completely dropping the whole thing, that's a massive win for Ripple, for XRP, and it could even change how crypto is regulated in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, the SEC doesn't just back down from these kinds of cases easily. So for them to drop it entirely, it suggests that maybe they're starting to see things differently. Maybe they're becoming more open to how crypto works.
It really makes you wonder what their reasoning was. The report doesn't get into too much detail about why they made this decision, but it's a pretty big deal. I mean, they could have just settled on certain points, but they chose to drop the entire case.
Right, and that sends a strong message. It's like they're saying, okay, maybe we need a new approach to regulating these digital assets.
And the market definitely reacted. The price of XRP jumped almost 15% right after the news came out. It's settled down a bit since then. It's trading around $2.41 according to the report, and it's actually down about 4% in the last day.
Yeah, that's to be expected. People get excited, buy up a bunch of XRP, and then some of them sell to take their profits.
Right, it's like that initial excitement wears off a bit.
But overall, I think people are feeling pretty good about this. It's a big win for Ripple, and it could mean good things for the rest of the crypto market, too.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of talk now about the possibility of an XRP ETF in the U.S. that would allow people to invest in XRP through traditional stock markets without having to actually buy the cryptocurrency directly.
Right, that would be a huge step towards making XRP more mainstream. I mean, if it's available through ETFs, then institutional investors like big investment firms could get involved too.
Exactly. And that could really change the game for XRP and for the whole crypto world.
It would.
But, even with this win for Ripple, there are still a lot of rules and regulations around ETFs. So it's not guaranteed that an XRP ETF will happen anytime soon.
Right. It's definitely not a done deal, but the fact that it's even being discussed seriously is a big change.
Okay, let's move on to something a little less positive. The report talks about this concerning trend of darknet markets using DeFi, which is decentralized finance, to launder money.
Yeah, this is a side of crypto that people don't always like to talk about.
Yeah, it's the dark side.
Exactly. Usually when people talk about illegal stuff with crypto, it's about privacy coins like Monero, or about how centralized exchanges can be misused. But it seems like things are changing.
Yeah, people on the darknet are getting smarter.
Right. They're finding new ways to hide their money.
And this is probably happening because there's more attention from the authorities on those other methods, like Monero and centralized exchanges. So they're looking for new ways to stay under the radar.
Exactly. It's like a game of cat and mouse, with criminals finding new ways to hide and law enforcement trying to catch up.
So how are they using DeFi? Well, it sounds like they're using decentralized exchanges, or DEX. Those are platforms where you can trade crypto without a central authority, like a bank. They're also using bridges, which allow you to move crypto between different blockchains. It's like moving money between different countries to make it harder to track. And then they're also using these things called liquidity pools. Those are basically big pools of cryptocurrency locked up in smart contracts, and they're used to make trading on DEXs easier. But criminals can use them to hide their transactions too.
The problem is that with DeFi, there's no one in charge. It's all run by these smart contracts, these pieces of code, so it's really hard for law enforcement to step in and stop things.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there.
It kind of is, but the report mentions that some experts think we'll see better tools to track crypto transactions and to monitor smart contracts. So maybe that'll help.
Hopefully. It's a constant battle. Okay, let's move on to something a little different. It seems like former President Donald Trump spoke at a digital asset summit this week, and he had some interesting things to say about stablecoins.
Yeah, he seems to be more supportive of stablecoins now than he was in the past. He actually talked about how they could help the U.S. dollar stay strong.
Right. He even said, and I quote, that he wants the U.S. dollar to stay at the top, and that's where we want to keep it. And he thinks stablecoins can help do that.
It's interesting because for a long time, a lot of politicians were pretty skeptical of crypto, but now more and more of them are starting to see the potential, especially with stablecoins.
Yeah, because they're tied to the U.S. dollar, so they're seen as more stable and less risky than other cryptocurrencies.
Exactly. And Trump even mentioned that the U.S. needs to be a leader in this space. He said we can't fall behind other countries like China and the EU.
And that ties into what we were talking about earlier with regulation. There's been a lot of discussion about how to create clear rules for stablecoins in the U.S. And the report mentions that banks are now allowed to hold stablecoins for their customers, which is a big step.
Yeah, that's a sign that things are moving in the right direction.
But there are still challenges. The report also talks about how transparency issues could slow down the use of stablecoins for everyday payments.
Right, because people need to be able to trust these stablecoins if they're going to use them to buy groceries or pay their rent.
Yeah, if you don't know how a stablecoin works or what's backing it, then it's hard to feel confident using it.
Absolutely.
Okay, finally, let's end on a lighter note. Binance, which is one of the biggest crypto exchanges, held the vote to see if they should list two new meme coins, Mubarak and Broccoli.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, it's kind of funny, right? But it also shows how popular meme coins still are.
It's crazy how much attention they get.
I know. And some people are really critical of them. They say they're just hype and speculation with no real value.
Right, and a lot of them are based on jokes or memes, so it's easy to see why some people think they're not serious.
But then again, they're also really popular, especially among new people in the crypto world.
Yeah, they're kind of like a gateway drug to crypto.
I like that.
You know, people get interested because of the memes, and then they start learning about the technology and the potential of crypto.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Binance let their users vote on this. It shows that they're listening to their community.
Right, it's like a form of decentralized decision-making.
Exactly. So even though they're a centralized exchange, they're still giving their users some power.
Which is pretty cool, I think.
So yeah, this week has been a wild ride in the crypto world. We've seen Pi Network struggling with real-world challenges, Ripple winning a huge legal battle, criminals finding new ways to use DeFi, and meme coins still holding strong.
It's like the whole spectrum of crypto, all in one whack.
It really is. So let's take a step back and think about what all of this means. You know, what does the Pi Network situation tell us about how hard it is to create truly decentralized and accessible projects? How will the SEC's decision about Ripple affect the future of crypto regulation in the U.S.? What are the risks and the benefits of DeFi growing so fast, especially when it comes to illegal activities? How could stablecoins change the global financial system, especially now that they're getting more support from politicians? And what does Binance's meme coin vote tell us about the relationship between crypto exchanges and their users?
Those are all great questions, and the answers are still unfolding. I mean, this is all happening in real time.
It is. So here's something to think about. As all of these trends continue the push for decentralization, the debates about regulation, the incredible speed of innovation, and the power of online communities, how do you think finance and technology will change in the next few years? How will all of these things we've talked about today shape the future?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. But it's an exciting time to be a part of this world. So keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep forming your own opinions. And thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.